There's a very interesting tweet today by Dr. Marty Macri. I'm going to put it up on the screen. Let me read it to you. Today, Biden and Ja are demanding $22.5 billion COVID funding. A lot of it will go to another vax that has not been disclosed, studied, or FDA authorized, the testing industrial complex to overtest immune students, and the off-label use of Paxlovid in asymptomatic low-risk people who don't need it. This is a really interesting tweet, and it's a very interesting point, which is, should we spend on public health? Yes, but should we spend on things that work or things that may not actually deliver what we want? So let's run through these things. Number one, my last video, I talked about this push for the yearly COVID-19 vaccination, or what the FDA has called in JAMA a new normal. It's very interesting. I've talked about the level of evidence we need before we should be persuaded by this vaccine. It's not going to be antibody titers. It's got to be something more. Randomized controlled trials showing that additional dose year after year further reduces the rate of severe disease or hospitalization. That's what we need. Should we pay for it before we see those data? I don't think so. You know, the entire rationale of Operation Warp Speed was that we need that first dose really quick. So we have to subsidize the industry, take away some of their risk so that we can get that first dose and change the trajectory of the pandemic so we don't lose trillions and trillions of dollars in GDP by having a prolonged pandemic. That was the rationale of Operation Warp Speed. But now that we've administered 1 dose, 2 dose, 3 dose, and even 4 dose for some people, do we need to continue to subsidize the industry for the annual shot? I don't think so. That rationale isn't there. If it works, we can pay for it. If it doesn't work, we don't have to pay for it. We don't need to pay for it proactively. And they have to really show it works. They have to show the endpoint that actually matters. So I think Marty's making a really good point here. We shouldn't be authorizing federal funds for this. I think insurers can cover it, Medicare can cover it if it works. You know, it should only be authorized if it works. Number 2, the testing industrial complex. I don't know what we're doing anymore with testing, because testing is only useful insofar as you can change something in the future, your behavior, so that you avoid something. But the way COVID is looking right now from the CDC's own seroprevalence data, in kids, we got 75% seroprevalence in this country. 75% have had COVID-19. And in other age groups, it's slightly lower, but it's all on the upswing. Eventually, COVID-19, like many other viruses, will reach a sort of saturation point, something between 93% and 100%, something in that ballpark, just as chickenpox once upon a time reached in that ballpark, and, you know, everyone will have had it. So what are we going to keep testing for? You know, you can test and take kids out of school and pull them an asymptomatic test to keep the workplace, quote unquote, safe. And you can test in your White House Correspondents' Dinner, but that's not going to stop people from still getting sick, because none of the tests are perfect. And it's not going to stop the broader pandemic trajectory. Each day in the world, in America, you know, we have 100 billion different interactions. You know, we have hundreds of millions of people, but they're interacting all over the place. So we have hundreds of billions of interactions, and you won't be able to test not the vast majority of the interactions, just a drop in the bucket. And in the grand scheme of things, it will make almost little to no difference in your broader pandemic trajectory. And we're all going to the same place anyway. 93 to 100% saturation, people having breakthrough COVID-19. So we don't need to keep funding the testing industrial complex. Maybe it made sense when you tried to curtail the virus before you had the vaccine, but in 2022, it don't make sense anymore. Certainly don't make sense. We shouldn't have to pay for it. We should only pay for it if somehow these testing companies can do studies showing that the routine application of the testing improves outcomes for people. And we have tried such studies in the past. We've done it for, you know, does the routine testing of platelet function improve outcomes for people after a stent, the Arctic study, and many other sorts of examples in biomedicine. So that's what the testing companies need to do. And we shouldn't have to foot their bill and, you know, buy them expensive homes and give them all these royalties until they actually prove it. And his last point, Paxlovid for low-risk people. You know, this speaks to something that I've written about in City Journal and I've done videos about, which is that the only published randomized control trial evidence for Paxlovid is in high-risk people who are unvaccinated. We don't have results in vaccinated people that are published and available. And the EPIC SR study has removed them from their protocol, at least from clinicaltrials.gov, so we may never know what the effect size is in vaccinated people. That really matters because you want to know what you're paying for. You're paying $500 a pop. How many people do we have to treat to prevent one hospitalization? What are we spending to prevent one hospitalization? Are we spending $10,000? That's within the realm of what people think is reasonable. $100,000? That's getting there. $1 million? 10 million? 100 million? We don't know what we're spending for event averted because we don't have an estimate of the number of people you need to treat. And Marty's point is well taken. Why are we paying for this without Pfizer generating the data? And we have to ask ourselves, putting this all together, what is going on here? We have an expensive package, and there are at least some parts of this package that are debatable. It doesn't make a lot of sense why you'd pay for it. Why would you pay for another vaccine? You don't know what's in it. You don't even know if it works yet. We're no longer in the moment we were in the initial pandemic where we needed to subsidize the industry to get it faster. We don't need an Operation Warp Speed in 2022 and 2042. Pfizer's doing pretty well. They made $100 billion last year. They're poised to do the same. They're doing pretty well. They can afford their own R&D efforts. The testing industrial complex, we don't need to subsidize this complex any further. They need to prove when, under what circumstances, their testing actually helps, and I doubt they can do it. It doesn't even make sense anymore. When you look at that trajectory of zero prevalence over time, all that testing is for nothing. Once you lower your risk of bad outcomes with vaccination, with optimizing your medications, with weight loss, there's nothing else really you can do to change the outcome that will happen when you get COVID, which you likely will inevitably get because it will have a saturation something between 93 and 100%. And then the off-label use of Paxlovid. We have to ask ourselves, what are we getting? Why are we paying all this money for Pfizer's Paxlovid? We need them to prove how much it helps. So those are my thoughts. Very interesting tweet by Dr. Marty Makary. We'll have to ask ourselves, why is this bill stalled? I think a lot of people do feel like, we paid all this money and we haven't really gotten a lot of results. And these are, three things that should be questioned. So if you like this video, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, comment, leave a message. Until next time.